All right. Welcome back to the Mortgage Marketing Expert Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Trudwell. Mortgage Marketing Expert is a proud founding member of Industry Syndicate Podcast Network. Our mortgage marketing expert today is Rene Rodriguez. Rene is entertaining, but he's not an entertainer. His clients describe him as powerful, thought-provoking, and authentic. And his engaging speaking style, backed by his scientific approach, makes him a top-rated speaker at every event. For the last 20 years, Rene has researched and applied behavioral neuroscience as a dynamic keynote speaker, leadership advisor, and world-class sales expert, as well as a renowned speaker coach. He believes that we're only scratching the surface of what's possible, that every profession can benefit from fully engaging human mind brain. He's trained over 100,000 people. He's a two-time TEDx speaker. He's one of the most sought-after leadership and influence training specialists for Fortune 500 companies. He shared the stage with the likes of Tony Robbins, George Bush, Magic Johnson, Ken Blanchard, and many more. And not only is he one of my best friends, he's one of the most impactful people in my life. Rene, welcome back to the podcast, my friend.
Good to be here, brother. Thank you.
Well, man,
shorten that thing up.
Yeah. I actually shortened up the bio from your website and the one I had last time, but there's so much good stuff in there. And I know that a lot of people know who you are, but for the couple that may not, we got to make sure and let people know that that you're the man. So
I'm on your podcast, man. I'm just trying to be like you, brother. Thank you for having me.
Well, I appreciate that. And man, it's been too long. We did this, it's been almost 2 years ago. Lots happened since then. So I'm glad to have you back. For part of it is you've got a cool event coming up in Vegas, Amplify Live. And I definitely want to get into that here in just a little bit because it's the first time you've done it. But man, I want to know what's going on with you. What you've got a book coming out, you've got events happening, you're doing amplifies all over the place. So I just kind of want to hear, what's going on with you, what's exciting you about what's going on in the world right now.
There's a lot going on right now. It's pretty wild. My days are pretty long and it feels good. I mean, it's, the COVID, I think, reminded us what was important. And for me, I was able to get back to focus on my health and really thinking about what I ate, movement, and those kinds of things and how it really affected performance. And thank God, I mean, we're on the road 20 plus days a month right now. Live events are live and strong. And we're literally, I think we have 4 spots available for the rest of the year in our Amplify in-person events. I mean, 4 spots, it's wild. We're already booking out in 2022. And what's crazy is I think 2 years ago, I was serious, like, man, I don't know if I want to open this up to the public. I don't know if, are people going to buy it? We were always doing it as a private event. And now we're literally, even last night, 9:30 at night, get a call from a company saying, we want to buy a full one. Can you squeeze us in? And literally our Jenny, our VP of events, and Maddie and everybody were trying to figure out how can we find the dates. And it's a wild ride, but we're excited. I think it's telling that people are really wanting to learn how to communicate better and wanting to be able to communicate their story in a more authentic way. So I'm excited. Yeah. And the book's coming. We've got our event in Vegas. That's coming. And we're approaching over 400 people now, which it's just unheard of for me that always did other people's events to do our first event and do that. I think it's exciting.
Man, that's cool because, I first listened to you speak. It's been, I think, over 3 years ago. And ever since then, I've really been fascinated with the approach that you take to this. We talk about Amplify and amplify awareness, and it's very much about influence. And obviously your audience is everything from Fortune 500 companies, and obviously the mortgage and real estate industry has embraced this. But from a perspective of influence and communication and leadership, I want to kind of kick off a little bit of a softball question by saying, in today's day and age, why is that so important? Why are so many people gravitating towards this? And why is it something that people need to if they're not?
Well, I think that transparency used to be a choice. I mean, it was one of those things that you could literally choose. Do I share this? Do I not share this? I could pretend to be one way in one certain circumstance, and I could pretend to be another. But social media doesn't make it a choice anymore. Your transparency is whatever people want to search about you, they will find. And there's so many cameras out there, so many recordings, so many things, everything's being captured. And so finding a way to now say, okay, what is my authentic self? And I even hate saying authentic self because it sounds like, the sort of the cliched platitude sort of airy fairy approach, but it's what we want out of people. We want an authentic conversation. When we don't have that, we don't believe, we don't trust. And so then we also run a business. So how do I bring my authentic self, really what's most important to me, my values, to a business conversation? I've got to either recruit people to work for me, sell my product or service, retain the people that are there, find the best talent, raise money, whatever it is, or set out a vision for people to follow. How do I do that in a way where people have so many choices as to where they go? And when people are faced with choices, we've got to then now take a different approach to how we get people to buy into our message as to what it is we're going. And since people have so many choices, I think it's requiring people to really take a look at what an authentic message is and what they're saying. Is it something that is much deeper, or is it surface? And I mean, that brings out a whole nother conversation of positive frustration, if you will.
I want to touch on something. You talked about bringing your authentic self, especially when there's so many choices in the market. I want to drill down that a little bit because I think it gets used as a punchline. We talk about
Yep.
authenticity and being real and all those things whenever so many people are still just using social media and so many of the platforms available to market their business and talk about mortgage and real estate and things like that. So you kind of touched on it a second about, bringing your values and who you are. But I want to kind of talk about authenticity in the way that we actually communicate with people, in the way that we not just share our business, but our lives and show up. So can you, from your perspective, kind of unpack that authenticity piece, because it is used so cliche anymore?
Yeah. Well, I think that, so you've got to be able to, we got to first understand we're in business, right? If we're having a business conversation, we've got to be able to bring that concept of authenticity to create a value, because business is about finding, maximizing shareholder wealth, maximizing stakeholder wealth, people that are involved. There's got to be an ROI to it. Whether you like it or not, that's the rules of the game. And so we have to be able to say, okay, within the confines of profitability, then how do I bring that conversation? Because what a lot of people do is they bring authentic stuff in a way that people just go, okay, that's great, you're rambling and doing things, but what does that really mean to my business? And they have a choice. Now, I might just follow you because you're entertaining, and there's a lot to be said for that. But when we're trying to build a business case, and that's who we're dealing with, is people that are trying to make a business impact, whether it's more sales or recruiting or retention, we've really got to go through an exploratory process, because then we're getting into the topic of leadership. Leadership, the number one skill set that they have to learn first is self-awareness. And so the self-awareness journey is a difficult one, because it requires a level of humility. It requires the ability to get feedback and say, you know what, I don't believe you. I can't tell you how many times in our Amplify course, people will say, yeah, we don't believe you. And the feedback that people get that are very respected leaders, and you get 10 people that are also respected saying, we don't believe a word you just said. And I'm going, in this sort of moment of going, okay, well, what did I do to communicate that? Well, it's this, and that. And the ability to just take that kind of feedback is building so much self-awareness. But you get some people that, would never listen to that feedback and say, oh, no, they're messed up. Well, then if that's you, that means you're out of touch. And so there's not much I can do to help you. If you're that out of touch with what's going on, you're not willing to get the feedback of reality, then you've decided you want your own little world, and that's fine. That world is going to feed you what you want to hear, and it's going to create the consoling illusion of value. And if you're okay with that, that's great. But if you want to go the authentic route, then you've got to be able to listen to some feedback from people, but then also explore your story. Why is it that you love what you do? And that process is not always easy. That process can be emotional. That process can be scary. That process can be difficult. And it takes courage to be able to do that. And so the exploration of that is really about, what do you believe? And so we say, let your heart speak in sequence. Well, what does the heart mean? Heart means values, beliefs, and memories. So we have to go down that path and exploring that.
So it's interesting, the example you used about, opening yourself up in that feedback of, we don't believe you. I had a similar experience. I've been through Amplify, 3-4 times now. And it was a room of very high performing mortgage professionals. And one of them at the end looked at me and said, "Hey, do you think that would have gotten my attention? Do you think that that would have resonated with me or someone like me?" And it was a great question, because my answer was, well, no, probably not. And I think so often we fool ourselves in our minds. When you talk about that self-awareness piece, we fool ourselves in our mind that this is good enough for the masses, but yet we're trying to attract a specific person. And we don't actually drill down in that is, okay, am I going to resonate with that crowd? So in that, and short of being in a room of people that are going to give you that feedback, how do people do that? Obviously, they have to explore their story. They've got to kind of get to their why. But how does the average person, short of coming to an Amplify, which is why it's so important, but short of that, how do people get that self-awareness and get the feedback they need?
Well, I think the other reality check is that most people aren't going to affect the masses, right? I don't even affect the masses. I don't think I affect masses. I might affect a few more people just because I have a public stage and I stand on the stage, but I don't affect masses. And so I got to begin with influence of those around me. And most people are going to affect people one-on-one. If you're a manager, you might have one on a few. And if you're called into public speaking, you're going to have one on many. And then that world is another 20-year journey to be able to get into one on a really big crowd. And because that piece, I think, if we can't even affect those around us, and we're trying to affect the masses, I think we got to turn that equation around. How do I affect one-on-one interpersonally? That's the first skill in the journey. I mean, one, self-awareness, but then we go, okay, so that begins with me, with you in front of me. Because how many times you met the person that, is crack the code of the masses, right? And then you meet them, personally, you're like, ooh, what's the incongruency here? I don't even recognize this person here. And then every once in a while you meet the person that you saw on stage and you meet them personally. You're like, wow, they're so down to earth. It's like the same person. Your respect for them goes up. And I think that's the longevity of it, is trying to remain that same throughout the process. But it begins with who you are and how you begin, not who you don't say, okay, I want to be like this person, and then start being that, but then people meet you and they realize you're not. The transparency will expose that very quickly. And I don't think people will be happy, to be quite frank. To be two people is difficult. I mean, there's all sorts of research around, who you are at work, where you're at home, and trying to separate the two, and the stress and the angst, the anxiety that causes people trying to be two different people. It's not there. Even like John Maxwell said, there is no such thing as business ethics. There's just ethics. And that means that the business ethics applies home and personal. And I think your persona, or who you are, should be congruent throughout all of that. And so that doesn't mean that you don't have a game face, right? And you don't have a game face for getting things done, but who you are in essence doesn't change. And so I think that's the piece, is can we influence those around us first?
So John Maxwell also has another quote that says, leadership is influence, and you're influencing people around you either positively or negatively, whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. And whenever you're talking about really being authentic and understanding your why, how do you tie those together? Right? How does the average person, when you're thinking about that, and even if not the average person, a mortgage professional specifically, how do they sit down and say, okay, why am I doing what I'm doing? How does that going to influence the people around me? And then for the bigger question is, to maintain that authenticity, how does that tie in to being able to do business? Because that's the question anybody gets asked about, any skill, any platform. How do I use it to grow? How do I use it to get business? So how do you piece all that together?
That's a journey. That's a long, big question there. I think that John said it right. Maxwell said it right. When, leadership is influence, there is no leadership without influence. There's no, those two go hand in hand. And I would also say that influence is the how of leadership. I want to be a better leader. How do you do that? Learn influence. And so then how do I do that in front of it? I mean, man, take Amplify for sure. But the process of influencing, we got to go back to understanding the basics. And I think Aristotle was the first person to ever talk about argumentative thought and persuasion. And we've talked about this, the ethos, pathos, and logos. I wonder if I still have my thing set up here. There we go. Actually, I do have it there if people are watching it. And ethos is the credibility, right? You've got it. We all have to have credibility. And I make the joke all the time that I'm going to I'm going to do a webinar on the menstrual cycle and what women go through and how to better manage the menstrual cycle. And people look at me like I'm crazy. Of course it's crazy. I'm not a woman. I don't understand that journey and probably don't have the credibility. I don't have a doctorate in that area. I don't have any information. So anything I would be saying would be hearsay. It's no different than me saying I'm going to do a seminar on how to grow rich and beautiful hair. Well, probably not what I should be talking about. And, the person that's broke talking about how to make money, the person who's fat and out of shape telling you how to lose weight. And in today's world, the person who has no following and no engagement telling you what works on social media. And so, I'm very opinionated on this topic because I believe in staying in your lane. And so staying in your lane, if you're going to critique what someone's doing social media, let's look how you're doing first. Okay, you've got 300 followers. Okay, you got 20,000 followers, but you got 10 people that commented. So we know how you got those. And so it's that concept of ethos is first in this journey of influence. We got to be able to have the ethos and the credibility, but ethos also translates into your essence. Who are you? And most people are very out of touch with that. And so second would be pathos. I think it's right there. I'm learning how to do this. Pathos. And pathos is your emotional appeal. You've got to be able to learn how to connect with people emotionally. So ethos is your credibility, staying in your lane and developing a very strong lane. But the pathos is the emotional appeal. You got to be able to grab people, and storytelling is such a great way of doing that. Voice inflection is a way of doing that. Being able to personally feel your own story and explore your own story is needed. I watched, we had somebody that told their story, and it's just an amazing story of a motorcycle accident, 150 miles an hour. And, I can mention him. It's Andy Burton, just one of the top producers in the country. We just had him last week, and he tells this amazing story of him going 150 miles an hour, hitting a culvert and ripping off his knee and his leg, completely losing his leg. And he tells a story, and he's so emotionally disconnected from the story. We're all in just like watching this, basically saying that it looked like, sorry, I've got allergies right now. It looked like a grenade went off, and he's just talking about it, but he was emotionally disconnected from the story, and understandably. And the conversation we had was not how do you become a better salesperson? He's nailed that. But how did he become more connected with his story? And he went through the process and sort of had to reconnect after 17 years of telling the story, re-buying in and allowing himself to feel, which is not easy. But oh my God, what it did for the story, it just made us all buy in and trust him even more. And so then logos is the logical appeal. We've got to make logical sense of what you're saying. There's got to be a logical component to it. And, emotion without logic is going to wear off. That's where buyer's remorse comes into play. We buy in emotionally, and then the emotion wears off, and we're like, why did we do that again? Like you buy a boat, right? So there's an emotional decision. When you wake up the next day, you're like, well, it's probably going to get me to stop eating out a few times, a week. So, and then I just won't drink anymore. So then I'm going to logic my way into, justifying the payment, whatever it is. We got to have all three. If you don't have them, doctors have a lot of ethos, but lack pathos typically. So they're going to say, well, the doctor said I should lose weight and be healthier, but I'll start Monday. Well, because they didn't have any pathos. And, if you take away great story, pathos is great and the logic makes sense, but who are you? Can I trust you? I mean, there's the ethos. It's kind of an important question. And so all three of those are things that really need to be part of that. And that's a great way to begin. There's two more, but that's where we get into sort of the advanced things, kairos and telos.
So, it's interesting. First of all, I can't not say this. You have to go to Amplify to hear these things. You've got to go and learn them and dissect them for yourself. What I want to ask is, and this is, I think, on the same track, at least in my mind, and I don't know that I've ever asked you this question before like this. What is your why for doing all this? Like, I know a lot about your story. I know a lot about you, but as I dissect that and think through those things for myself, even you going through, ethos, pathos, logos, what is your why? I understand that the check marks and those, but what is Rene accomplishing here? What are you pursuing in this?
That's a big question, Phil. Are you ready for that one?
I'm ready.
I don't know if I ever shared it. I don't think I've shared it. I think a lot of people say, well, my kids are my why, and my why is my family and all that stuff. And those are all part of it, obviously, but it's not it for me. To me, it's been a journey of discovery for over 27 years, 30 years. And it comes to a few stories. And so this is not a short answer because it's a big topic. But the combination of a lot of stories. One is I'm not a religious person. My mother was a nun. I grew up Lutheran, went to Catholic schools, believe in all sorts of things. But I think there are certain really beautiful lessons that come from, scripture in the Bible. And, having gone to Catholic schools, you tend to study those things, and you study them in the context of business sometimes, which is really fascinating. And I spent two and a half years studying the concept of work and leisure, right? Work is, what we do in the world. And leisure, I used to think was, having a beer with your friends and playing, but it's not. When you learn what the true definition of leisure, it's contemplation and reflection. And it was said once that contemplation and reflection is the highest form of prayer. Look at, in the story of creation, at the end of each day, what did God do? He asked himself, did I do good today? And it's contemplation. If he did well, if he answered was yes, he rested well. And so contemplation is a big part of it. The reflection. My son calls me a philosopher, and my people that know me close call me a philosopher because I'm always thinking, what does this mean? Challenging my thoughts, challenging a question. And the philosophical component, I think, is critical because it's all about contemplation and reflection. What am I doing? How's my impact on people? How is this impacting myself, my family? What does this really mean? What's the definition of this? What does it mean to be a Republican? What does it mean to be a Democrat? What does it mean to be in the middle? What does it mean? Is this what God would want? Is this what Jesus would want? Is this, what Buddha would want? Who knows? What if he was here? What would he do? Those questions are endless. And so I look at one of the most impactful stories to me was the story of the talents. And whether it happened or not, I think it's cool. It did show up in all four Gospels. God comes down and gives somebody 1 talent, one person 3 talents, another person 5. Comes back later, asks the person who gave 5, what'd you do with those 5? And Jim Rohn was kind of the one that introduced me to this concept. He said the person with 5 said, I turned him into 10. He said, great job. Person did 3, what'd you do? I said, well, I turned him into 6. Hey, awesome. Person did 1, what'd you do? He said, I buried it, did nothing with it. And it was said in certain terms that God lost his cool. It's one of the times he was most angry. I gave you a gift and you did nothing with it. And so to me, that kind of resonated with me at an early age, saying, okay, so God's giving me gifts. I'm going to put that in the list. And I got to do something with it. The question is what? Okay, well, there's another study I learned from Jack Canfield on near-death experiences. And studied 2,700 people that saw the light and everything, and they asked them questions, and they all reported very similar responses. One is seeing a light. These are people that died and came back, right? And medically died and came back to life. They all saw the light. And the second is that they were approached by somebody. But the cool part is they were asked 2 questions. And the first question was, did you gain knowledge? Okay, that's kind of cool. Second question was, did you expand your capacity to love? Okay. I have wrestled with those 2 questions for the 20 plus years that I learned it. And I can almost answer anything. Even what you and I talked about before we went live, sort of the trials and tribulations of life can be answered in those. Are you learning something? Did you gain knowledge? And in the trials and tribulations, have you expanded your capacity to love? It's easy to love when times are good. Can you love when things aren't working out? And I thought, how beautiful of a filter. Gaining knowledge and expanding my capacity to love. So here I go. I've got skills. I've got a talent. I'm going to figure out what those talents are. Somebody gave them to me. And I got to go out and learn as much as I can and expand my capacity to love under the most difficult times. Why? Well, maybe it's to further in the creation that he was trying to do. Did I do good today? Well, maybe my job is to utilize my skill sets to gain knowledge, expand my capacity to love, and further in his creation. That's why I do what I do. I don't mean to cry, but it's very important to me.
So first of all, thank you for that. That's one of the reasons I asked the question is I knew in knowing you and knowing the intentionality that you take with I have goosebumps right now, by the way, in knowing the talent or the intentionality that you take with the people that attend Amplify and the people that you know in your life and coach. There was a very specific thing there. And the thing I've always loved about you is your transparency, your authenticity, and your willingness to share those with other people. And that brings that out in other people. So along those lines, as you've kind of determined this why, you understand what drives you and what your passion is. I think a lot of leaders like you or that aspire to be you want to influence people to find that for themselves. I've seen an exercise where you help people dig deeper. Why do you do what you do as a mortgage professional? Okay, but why? And you kind of drill down in there. How can people find that? I think, and to say one more thing, I think people want to feel that passion that you just displayed, that emotion of something that means so much to them. It drives them on a daily basis. How do people find that?
Yeah, sorry. I how do they find it? I think you contemplation. Like, to me, it's you've got to reflect every day. You got to ask yourself, was I a good person today? You got to stop saying, oh, no, I'm not good at this. No, if you're good at something, say, okay, wait, hold on a second. Am I good at this? Is this what my skill is? You're not doing the world any good by being good at something, having a gift and not doing anything with it. And, people wonder why I'm so stubborn. And so, like, I get very, what's the word? Care enough to be unreasonable in the course and with my clients. And I'm very clear as to why I'm doing it. And, but I think how you find it, you've got to start reflecting every day. And people say overthinking. Sometimes you got to overthink. Sometimes you got to allow yourself, not to the place where it becomes detrimental or becomes paralyzing, but asking yourself, am I doing good? What are my values? The exploration of that. Get in the game and don't expect to figure it out overnight. It might take you 20 years. But in that 20 years, you learn and you're growing and you're experiencing and you're developing and you're changing and you're ebbing and flowing. You got to love the journey. And what I tell people is that, there's no place that you make it. I've made it. Made what? You're only alive in the journey. You're only alive during the lessons. You're only alive in the falling in the faces and your losses and the successes. And all of that's part of the journey. And anybody thinks that there's some place that you're trying to get, you're missing the boat. You're missing life. Life is happening now. If you're in a shit place, that's where you're at right now. If you're in a great place, that's where you're at right now. What are you learning? Are you being a good person? Are you helping other people? Are you growing community? Are you utilizing your gifts? Those are questions you got to ask yourself. And the cool part is that we all have different ones. And we've got to go after it.
Man, caring enough to be unreasonable. That in and of itself is a profound thing. It's something that you exhibit, because there's times whenever you've had me at that spot and the place that you've pushed me to personally, either publicly at Amplify or privately, sometimes in my mind, I'm like, well, that's not fair. That's unreasonable. But I go back to, you care about me. You care about people. I don't want to not keep at the same place we're at, but I want to try to get tactical with it. On that concept of caring enough to be unreasonable, how do tactically people use that? Assuming they've put some of these things together we're talking about, how do they use that to influence referral partners, influence their consumers, and care enough to be unreasonable for them? What are some tactical ways to do that?
Well, I think that, do you believe in what you're doing? Right. So you've got to create the self-belief in what you're doing. And do you believe that you're doing a good thing? Do you believe that by working with you is going to better their life? The only way to believe that is by actually being that and going through the process to be. If you're ho-humming your way through it and you're saying, I believe I'm good, then you're lying to yourself. Go to be a professional. In this world, it requires professional level of effort and work. Any professional athlete is in the gym early, in the gym late, monitoring their diet, getting 5, 6, 7 coaches, watching every aspect of what we're doing. And then we call ourselves professionals and we wake up in the morning and ho-hum our way through the day. Well, here's some news. Someone else out there is working a little bit harder. And if they get in front of your clients before you do, they're going to win. And especially in a competitive world, it's going to come. So to be that, you've got to start being that every day. Be that person of quality. Go into it. And if you're new, there's nothing more beautiful than refreshing energy and spirit going after something where you say, you know what, I may not know it all, but I can find it. And your purpose in this part of your journey is to be the most resourceful and the hardest working. That will win you business. And if you've been in 20, 30 years, maybe your part of that journey is to be the wise one. to be the sage to say, you know what, in my 20 years, here's what I've learned. And in 20 years of doing something, you don't need to work with everyone. Sometimes it is about saying, you know what, I don't think I'm the right fit, but there is someone that is. I give away coaching students all the time. I don't do that because it's not my lane. Now, I will coach and work with some, but there's so many that just aren't good that I'm not good for them.
Right.
And so enjoy the journey, be good at that. And so then your job is to be crystal clear about what you're offering and the value that you offer. And so to me, the story that I always tell, good friend of mine, Scott Hardy, we both, in any good sales pro is going to have a story like this in their life where they knew they should have stepped up, where they questioned, God, am I really doing the right thing? Am I really in the right business? I mean, do I really believe in this? He used to sell long-term healthcare insurance, and he went dinner at his best friend's house, and the parents started talking about how his father came down with a long-term illness, and it was going to be very expensive to care for him over the years. And he said the moment that topic came up, his heart sunk to the floor because he knew exactly what was coming next. He said, and it's just on cue, his friend goes, Mom, Dad, hold on a second. Scott has a product that solves this problem. We have something for this, Scott. And all of a sudden, everybody looks at Scott, and father says, well, Scott, what do you got for me? And he said, the hardest thing I had to say was that I couldn't help him because the policy would have had to been in place prior to diagnosis. He goes, but that wasn't even the hard part. The hard part was what the father said afterwards when he said, so were you waiting for something like this to happen to tell me about it? Mm-hmm. And see, what that meant to me was he didn't care enough to be unreasonable. He didn't care enough because he said, I didn't want to push people. Well, if you really believed in what you're doing, you'd tell everybody about it. If you had the cure for cancer, you'd be going around trying to find everyone. How many lives can you save? If you have the cure for lack of wealth building, and you really believe that home ownership is the way, then what the hell are you waiting for? You should be knocking on everyone's door. And when somebody says, well, I already have a lender, and you go, oh, okay. And when I get to, well, what do I say when they have a lender? You say, no shit. Every agent has a lender already. We haven't worked together yet. And the good news is we do some pretty cool things. But don't believe me. Let me show you. Let me work with one. Give me a shot. Here's what it is. There aren't any patent monopolies out there. Not very many things are unique. We all have access to the same rates. Let me show you how we care for our clients. There's 3 things I think that make us unique. But let me just show you. And even if it's a deal that doesn't work out, maybe in the next 6 months, do something. But you have that meeting 100 times, you're going to be happy. Be a lot of business comes away. And if you follow through on it, because you're a pro and you get up early and you do your work, you're going to build a career. You don't just show up and things happen. We got to work from a place of value, from our purpose, and from a competitive perspective on how are we competing in this marketplace. It's got to be both.
Man, that's so good. That's so good. And that just caps off everything, because I feel like we've covered a lot of the bases that are extremely important enough to kind of give people a taste. So let's transition here to number 1, Amplify Live. Real quick, let's talk about we're just outside, I think, 2 weeks away from Amplify Live in Las Vegas. You're about to sell out, but you still have tickets left. So talk about that real quick, where people can find that information, some details, and why it's so dang important to get there.
Well, it's the Amplify Live. We do have spots open. We're over 400 folks right now that are going to be there. We're trying to get to 500, and right now we're seeing a lot more people come. And we've got our live in-person event is the one that's almost sold out. But Amplify Live is going to be in Las Vegas. It's a 1-day event. Very unique. I think that we're going to be creating a very unique experience with a combination of going deeper on some topics, having some group exercises that people are going to go to together. But you're doing it with some of the top producers in the country. And yeah, it's good to be around top producers, but it's also about how they think and what they do. And when you can rub elbows with those folks and have the side conversations, and you can see the commitment to learning, how most of them are bringing their teams to this event, it's going to be pretty powerful. So yeah, we've got some great speakers that are going to be coming on stage and doing some unique things and sharing stories that they probably haven't shared before, but really giving the insights on how they use influence in their careers to grow. And so yeah, it's going to be fun. Amplify My Life is the URL, and you click up at the top around Amplify Live. I think that's how that works. Yeah, up at the top of that is a big red bar, and you just click on Learn More or Register, and it'll go there.
Yeah, we had one of the comments. Paul asked, where do we find the live event schedule? As you can see right here, Rene, it's amplifymylife.com. Go check out the events. You've got a ton of content, and man, you've been an incredible friend and inspiration and mentor to me. And I thank you so much for that, because you have changed my life. You changed my business, my family's life. I know it's one of many, because I've got a lot of friends and acquaintances that you've done the same thing for. But before we let you go, I got to ask you one last question. You've answered this before, and we ask all of our guests, and that's if you could just give one tip to mortgage professionals today to go out to use to build their business, what would it be?
One tip. I'm a sales guy at heart. And so to me, it's if you don't understand the numbers behind your business, the mathematics on how many phone calls, how many dials, how many talk tos, how many leads you need to generate, if you don't understand that stuff, you're not going to be in this business. So go out there, make as many phone calls, make as many calls as you can, get to as many relationships as you can, and have a good story to tell. Have a strong value proposition. Be able to tell the story of your company, what makes you unique. And if you can do that enough, you're going to fail in the beginning, but just keep doing it. You'll get better at it. And if you suck at it, then ask agents and ask your referral partners, what are they looking for in a relationship like yours, and start building a business around what you hear most. But you have to create activity in that world, and you have to measure that activity. If it's working, if it's not, and then reflect, what did I do good? What did I do really well, and what didn't work? And if you do that after action review, after every call, after every presentation, you're going to start building a career. And over time, you're going to start doing really well. So that would be my case. It's something simple. I think the fundamentals are everything right now.
Dude, I love that, because every successful person that I've ever talked to, including you, talks about consistent and persistent effort over time. And you frame that extremely well of, you've got to know your numbers. This is a numbers business. You can create some effectiveness and efficiency by applying the principles that we've been talking about for the last 37, 38 minutes. But at the end of the day, you got to know what your numbers are. So yeah, Rene, I appreciate you. Everybody go to crenespeak.com, go to amplifymylife.com, get into his content, get into one of these events. Rene, as always, incredible guest. I'm glad we got to do this. Our inaugural Facebook, LinkedIn live podcast recording.
Awesome.
Appreciate you taking part of it, and I look forward to catching up again soon.
Hey, the respect is mutual. I love you, brother. Thanks for having me on, and thanks all for watching, and keep doing what you're doing, man. You're an inspiration to a lot of people. You're the one leading the way on this podcasting stuff, and I appreciate everything you've done for me as well. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. See you soon.
Take care.